My research project here in Graz is focused on the political vision of Ante Marković.
So my research is based on my PhD dissertation, which is the Mediterranean Yugoslav popular culture.
So I'm interested in the memory especially memory in Yugoslavia and theater, how theater co-creates this narrative.
And the topic of my research is in the field of transitional justice.
I'm completing a book project that deals with the question of the lived experiences of Islam.
And I did my work on memories among free transnational Bosnian families.
My research here at Center for Southeast European Studies and the University of Graz is dedicated to the history of food.
Welcome to the Center for Southeast European Studies. I am Lura and this is my colleague Dario.
And we're both delighted to introduce you to our visiting fellows for this term.
So my project investigates the political vision of Ante Marković and the basis of his program, which are deployed into three dimensions: the institutional dimension, the economic dimension, and the historical cultural dimension. So I explore the narrative that Ante Marković and his political party elaborate, as well as their strategies to reanimate and to reinstate a political demos, a common past and culture, and a vision of future, re-elaborating the historical myth of the second Yugoslavia, and also grounding on a model, an economic model of transformation which kept some elements of self-management and workers' ownership. So my project aims also to extend reflections about the broader changes in 1989 and around 1989 transformations in Central Eastern Europe. For me, it was almost a natural choice to apply and to come here and to have the opportunity to exchange viewpoints and approaches, and also the current state of our researches with the other fellows. Also, the position of Graz was an asset for me because my work, empirical work, is concentrated especially in Zagreb.
So my research is based on my PhD dissertation, which is the Mediterranean Yugoslav popular culture. I have three case studies. One is popular music, or in Serbo-Croatian zabavna glazba. The second one is television, the third one is fashion. So basically what I'm trying to see how Yugoslavia defined itself as the Mediterranean country, especially when it comes to popular culture. And I started that as a kind of like trying to see how Yugoslavia appropriated Italian influences in its own culture, but then I really got into what does actually the Mediterranean, or in Yugoslav case the Adriatic, mean, and also to try to escape from traditional paradigm of Yugoslav society as a Balkan society. Center for Southeast Studies is a good starting point for your career. But the more important, because I'm doing my PhD in Florence at European University Institute, which is a great institute, but no one really works on my topic, so I decided, okay, maybe it would be good to actually test if what I'm working on actually makes sense for people that work on Southeast Europe and maybe are not that familiar with the Mediterranean in general.
We are standing in front of the opera in Graz, which is architecturally speaking almost identical to the Croatian National Theatre in Rijeka. And this interesting fact can give us two insights. One is of course about continuities in our societies, but the other is about two very different social roles that theatre can play in two different societies. Well, Opera in Graz has mostly entertainment role and of course also educational role. It recreates and it presents the main works of classical music and musical theatre. the theater in Rijeka gained in the last couple of years very different role, mostly due to its artistic director, pretty famous post-Yugoslav theater director Oliver Frljić, that is who does political performances, socially engaged performances, and so on. One of the possible examples is the theater piece Other War, Drugi rat, when they put 5 different women in the mode of documentary theater on the stage to narrate their own experiences of the war. And they did it during the Croatian national holiday, so-called Thanksgiving, where we are kind of celebrating the homeland war, and it's celebrated through the exclusive narrative of magnificent victory. So the narrative of these women were kind of challenging this dominant narrative. And this is one of the examples how theater can challenge the dominant memory narrations, or I would rather say how theater can contribute or co-create the cultural memory that we all share. And that's the main topic of my research.
My research topic for my PhD is about post-war compensation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I look at the period after 1995, and I've identified various victim categories in the country, some of which have been compensated by the state or the entities of the state, and some of which have not received anything until today. And so the aim of my PhD has been to explain why some of these categories have been able to receive compensation while others have not. So I created a model that explains the factors behind these varied compensation results. I spent 4 months here at the center, and as part of the fellowship I was mostly working on my PhD. I finished 3 of my empirical chapters, so it was extremely productive whilst I was here. So the main benefit of the center here at the Graz University is the expertise that it's created and the reputation that it's built over the past few years, and the amount of scholars, the Balkan scholars that come here, which is a great benefit for my PhD. Back in Oxford, I have been mostly in discussions with scholars of political science or peace building, but I have not really been able to discuss my work with regional experts as I'm able to do here. So the main benefit of coming to Graz really is the regional expertise that my institution back in Oxford does not really have.
At the moment I'm working on 2 research projects here in Graz. So the first project is my monograph. So I'm completing a book manuscript that deals with the question of lived religious experience among Muslim communities in Southeast Europe, in particular in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and how their Muslim lives have been transformed in regard to recent historical events, but also in regard to old and new transnational and transregional religious entanglements. Which brings me to the second project I'm working on at the moment in collaboration with some members from the center, is to situate Muslim communities from Southeast Europe in the wider context of global Islamic history. And in particular, I'm interested in networks of circulation of people, media, texts, and so on, in regard to, again, wider trans-regional networks. And I'm specifically looking into Sufi networks, educational networks, pilgrimage networks, and charitable economies that have been emerging in the region in recent decades.
I am a social anthropologist working on issues of memory studies and transnational studies, and I did my research among 3 transnational Bosnian Muslim families who live in Scandinavia. And in my work I was concentrated on how memories on critical events like war, flight, expulsion and so on are constructed and transmitted within those families, between generations, for example, and also between those different places and spaces between Bosnia and Denmark and Sweden. And especially I concentrated on the issue how the family house in Bosnia is perceived as a site of memory, showing different ambivalences people have towards the house and also ambivalences told through the house, like for example stories of the war, like seen through the traces on the architecture of the house, or also a site of joyful family gatherings once a year. Of course, then ask the question how these memories, which role do they have on the issues of concepts of identity, belonging, and the concept of home. Also here making a distinction between home and house, which was a very important issue, and also seeing how these intimate and private memory sites like a family house, which role do they play in the official memory narrative of Bosnia, and especially in this case of Republika Srpska, because most of the Bosnian Muslim population is left out of the official narrative. And so this is kind of also a political statement people place or give through their houses, and telling that we are still here and we are not forgotten or neglected. And yeah, we kind of see the house as a kind of a resistance as well.
So my research here at Center for Southeast European Studies, the University of Graz, concerns the history of food and cultural entanglements in the sphere of history of food. And what I'm trying to do is to see how these cultural exchanges in the sphere of history of food occur in the 18th and 19th century. That is why I'm going to see how the traveling of Bulgarian gardeners in Wallachia, Moldova, Habsburg monarchy, including Hungary, Austria, and also Serbia, Vojvodina, contributed to these cultural exchanges in the sphere of food in the 18th and 19th century. It was very striking how in the first decade after the establishment of modern Bulgarian state in 1879, in the first Bulgarian restaurants, cafeterias, especially in Sofia and other big cities, most of the restaurant owners and also waiters and waitresses were people who came from the Habsburg monarchy at that time. They were Austrians, they were Czechs, Hungarians, Serbs, etc. And in fact, in this time, there was no so fixed cultural barrier. It's very evident from the history of food that there was no this cultural barriers as far as exchanges in the sphere of food, culinary and cuisine was concerned.